Welcome to Communication Mastery. I want to start with a truth that most people learn far too late in their careers. The quality of your ideas matters far less than your ability to communicate them. I've watched brilliant people get passed over for promotions because they couldn't present their work effectively. I've seen mediocre ideas succeed spectacularly because they were packaged well and communicated with conviction. I've witnessed relationships deteriorate because of emails that said one thing but landed completely differently than intended. This is one of the most important skills you'll ever develop. Whether you're writing an email, leading a meeting, giving a presentation, or having a difficult conversation, your ability to communicate determines your professional success more than almost any other factor. Today we're going to cover the complete landscape of professional communication. We'll explore why communication fails even when you think you're being perfectly clear. We'll talk about email, the tool we spend the most time with and often use the worst. We'll decode the unspoken rules of instant messaging and Slack culture. We'll learn how to present to executives and skeptics who'd rather be anywhere else. We'll also cover the art of listening, which is often overlooked in communication training. We'll tackle documentation, why most of it goes unread and how to fix that, and we'll preview how to approach difficult conversations, a topic we'll go much deeper on in a later episode. By the end of this hour, you'll have frameworks and tactics that will make you communicate more effectively than 90% of your colleagues. The principles are simple, but most people never learn them explicitly. Today you will. Let's begin. Before we get into tactics, we need to understand why communication breaks down so consistently. Because once you see the pattern, you'll understand why the tactics we'll cover actually work. And more importantly, you'll be able to diagnose communication problems when they arise. Communication fails for 4 predictable reasons. Let me break each one down because understanding these gaps is the foundation of everything else we'll cover. First, we assume shared context. When you write an email or prepare a presentation, you have a whole world of context in your head. The history of the project, the political dynamics in play, what happened in yesterday's meeting, the 5 similar situations you've dealt with before. You unconsciously assume the reader or listener has all of this context too. They almost never do. Second, we overestimate our own clarity. Psychological research consistently shows that people believe their writing and speaking is clearer than it actually is. You know what you meant, so the words seem obvious to you. To a reader or listener encountering them fresh without access to your mental context, those same words are often ambiguous, confusing, or subject to misinterpretation. Third, we underestimate interpretation variance. 10 people can read the same email and get 10 different meanings from it. Tone, intent, priority, emotional subtext, all of these are interpreted through the reader's own filters, their current mood, their history with you, their assumptions about the situation. 2 people reading identical words can have completely different experiences. And fourth, there's a vast gulf between intent and impact. You intended to be helpful with your feedback. They experienced you as condescending. You intended to communicate urgency. They experienced you as panicking. You intended to show enthusiasm. They experienced you as naive. The impact of your communication often has surprisingly little to do with your intent. Understanding these gaps is the first step to communicating better. Now let's talk about what to actually do about them. There's a concept in psychology called the curse of knowledge that explains much of why communication fails. Once you know something, you literally cannot imagine what it's like not to know it. Your brain has been changed by the knowledge, and you can't undo that change. This creates enormous problems in communication. You skip steps that seem obvious to you, but aren't obvious to someone without your background. You use shorthand and jargon that makes perfect sense to you, but confuses others. You make logical leaps that feel natural to you, but leave your audience behind. Experts are particularly susceptible. The more you know about a subject, the harder it becomes to explain it to beginners. You've forgotten what it was like not to know the basics. You've internalized so many concepts that you don't even notice when you're using them. The practical implication is this: the reader or listener is always less informed than you think. Whatever level of context and background you assume they have, assume less. Whatever explanation you think is sufficient, make it more explicit. Whatever steps you think are obvious, spell them out. This isn't about dumbing things down or being condescending. It's about recognizing that your expertise creates blind spots about what others don't know. The best communicators constantly fight the curse of knowledge by asking themselves, what would I need to explain to someone who wasn't in the room for the last 6 months? This quote captures something profound. Most communication problems aren't recognized as communication problems. People think they've communicated clearly. They think the other person understood. They operate as if the message was received as intended. And then things go wrong. Deadlines are missed because priorities weren't clear. Conflicts arise because feedback was interpreted differently than intended. Projects fail because assumptions were never surfaced. The illusion that communication has taken place is dangerous precisely because it's invisible. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know that your message was misinterpreted until the consequences arrive. This is why the best communicators are obsessively paranoid about being understood. They over-communicate. They check for understanding. They ask people to play back what they heard. They assume misunderstanding is the default until proven otherwise. Throughout this episode, we'll build habits and techniques that combat this illusion. We'll learn to communicate in ways that increase the odds that our intended message actually lands. But it starts with accepting that communication is harder than it seems, and that success requires deliberate effort. Let's start with email because it's where most professional communication happens and where most professional communication goes to die. Despite being the most common communication tool, most people are shockingly bad at it. Here's something you need to understand. Putting urgent in your subject line doesn't make people respond faster. It makes them trust you less. Why? Because everyone does it. We're drowning in supposedly urgent requests. Every email seems to be marked priority. Every request is time sensitive. When everything is urgent, nothing is. The word has been so overused that it's now visual noise that gets filtered out. I worked with someone who marked every single email as urgent. After a few weeks, I learned to ignore the urgency flag entirely. When she had something actually time critical, I treated it the same as everything else. She had cried wolf so many times that the signal became meaningless. If something is truly urgent, meaning it genuinely cannot wait even a few hours, email is the wrong medium. Pick up the phone, send a text message. Walk to their desk if you're in the same building. The physical break from the normal pattern signals actual urgency far more effectively than capital letters in a subject line. For everything else, stop using urgency as a manipulation tactic. It damages your credibility over time. People start ignoring your urgent requests, and then when something is actually time sensitive, they miss it. You've undermined your own ability to signal importance when it really matters. The military developed a communication principle called BLUF, bottom line up front. It's the single most important email principle you'll ever learn, and it will immediately improve every email you send. Here's how most people write emails. They start with background, build up to the context, explain their reasoning, acknowledge the complexity, maybe tell a story about why this matters, and then finally, buried in the last paragraph, they make their request. By that point, half the readers have given up and moved on to the next email. BLUF means flipping this entirely. Start with your ask or your conclusion. Your very first sentence should communicate what you need and by when. Something like, I need your approval on the attached budget proposal by Friday end of day so we can submit before the quarterly deadline. Then, and only then, provide the supporting context and reasoning for those who want more detail. Why does this work so well? Because busy people skim. Research shows that attention drops dramatically after the first few lines. People read the start of an email and decide whether to continue. If your ask is buried at the bottom, they might never reach it. If it's right at the top, they immediately understand what you need. There's a counterintuitive benefit too. Putting your ask first often means you write less unnecessary background. When you have to justify why you're asking before you actually ask, you tend to over-explain. When you ask first, you naturally include only the context that's truly necessary. Let me give you a template for structuring effective emails. This structure works for probably 90% of professional emails. Line 1 is your ask or key information. What do you need? What's the one thing they must understand even if they read nothing else? Get this right, and the email succeeds even if they skim everything below. Lines 2 and 3 are essential context only, not comprehensive background, not the full history, just the minimum context needed to understand and respond to your ask. If you find yourself writing more than 2 to 3 sentences of context, ask yourself, is all of this truly necessary? When you have multiple items or action points, use bullet points. Paragraphs are hard to scan, bullets are easy. Each bullet should be one discrete item that can be understood independently. End with the next step and deadline. What specifically needs to happen, and by when? Don't leave this ambiguous. Let me know your thoughts is weak. Please send your feedback by Tuesday is clear. This structure respects people's time and attention. It front-loads the important information. It's easy to skim, and it reduces the back and forth that happens when people aren't sure what you're asking for. Your subject line is the headline that determines whether your email gets read now, later, or never. Most people treat subject lines as an afterthought. This is a mistake. Specific subject lines dramatically outperform generic ones. Q3 marketing budget approval needed by Friday tells me exactly what this email is about and that I need to do something. Question tells me nothing and gets deprioritized behind everything more specific. When possible, include the action needed right in the subject line. Review. Draft proposal for client meeting is better than just draft proposal. The reader knows what you're asking before they even open the email. Some organizations use formal prefixes, and they work well even if your organization doesn't require them. Action means you need someone to do something. FYI means this is informational, no response required. Decision means a choice needs to be made. These prefixes help readers triage their inbox efficiently. Here's a practice most people neglect. Update subject lines as email threads evolve. If you start a thread about client kickoff meeting and it evolves into discussing project timeline, change the subject to reflect the actual current topic. This makes emails findable later and helps everyone understand what the thread is actually about. The Reply All button has probably wasted more collective human time than almost any other feature in modern software. Let's talk about how to use it responsibly. Reply All should be rare, not your default. Before you hit Reply All, ask yourself, does every single person on this thread actually need to see my response? Usually the answer is no. Usually your reply is relevant to 1 or 2 people, and you're just adding noise for everyone else. The math is brutal. If you send an unnecessary reply all to 20 people and each person spends just 30 seconds reading and processing your email, you've collectively wasted 10 minutes of human productivity. Multiply this by the dozens of unnecessary reply alls that happen in most organizations every day, and you start to understand the scale of the problem. Here's a pro move. Use BCC to break reply all chains. When you're replying to a large thread where the conversation is winding down, move everyone except the relevant parties to BCC with a note like, moving others to BCC to reduce inbox clutter. This stops the chain without seeming rude. Remember, your efficiency comes at the cost of everyone else's interruption. Before hitting reply all, consider whether you're adding value for everyone on the thread or just for yourself. There's a trap that ambitious professionals fall into. They pride themselves on responding to email instantly, often within minutes. This seems like good customer service or responsiveness, but it creates several problems. First, you train people to expect instant responses from you. Every time you reply within 5 minutes, you're implicitly promising that you'll always reply within 5 minutes. The moment you can't meet that standard, people think something is wrong or you're ignoring them. Second, constant email monitoring destroys your ability to do deep work. Every time you check email, you lose focus. Research suggests it takes over 20 minutes to fully regain concentration after an interruption. If you're checking email every few minutes, you're never actually doing your most important work. Third, instant responses often aren't better responses. The pressure to reply quickly means you don't think as carefully. You're more likely to make mistakes, miss nuances, or send something you'll regret. Better approach. Batch your email processing. Check at set intervals, maybe 3 times a day. Set expectations with colleagues about your response windows. For most business communication, Responding within a few hours or even the next day is completely fine. The key distinction is important versus urgent. Most emails feel urgent but aren't. They can wait. Reserve instant response for genuine emergencies and batch everything else. Now let's talk about instant messaging. Slack, Teams, whatever your organization uses. These tools have created entirely new ways to communicate and entirely new ways to miscommunicate. The unwritten rules are often unspoken, but violating them damages your reputation. Let's be honest about what these common phrases actually communicate. Everyone in a professional environment has seen these, and everyone knows what they really mean. Per my last message says, I already answered this question, and I'm annoyed that you didn't read it or remember it. It's a way of saying pay attention while maintaining plausible deniability. Just following up says, you haven't responded, and I'm running out of patience. The just is false minimization. It's not casual. It's a nudge that's trying not to look like a nudge. As I mentioned, says, you clearly weren't paying attention when I said this before. I'm repeating myself because you failed to listen the first time. Everyone knows what these phrases really mean. They're not professional. They're passive-aggressive, and they escalate tension rather than resolving whatever the actual issue is. If someone missed your message, just resend the information without the editorial commentary. If you need a faster response, call or set a meeting. If someone consistently doesn't listen, have a direct conversation about the pattern instead of scoring points in email. Passive-aggressive phrasing makes you feel superior in the moment, but damages the relationship over time. Here's a phrase that kills productivity. Let me know. Let me know what exactly. What action are you hoping I'll take? By when? Let me know is a request disguised as a non-request. You're hoping the recipient will infer what you need without you having to explicitly state it. Sometimes they will, often they won't, and you'll be frustrated when they don't do the thing you never actually asked them to do. Be explicit about what you need. Instead of, let me know if you have questions, try, please reply by end of day with any questions, or I'll assume we're aligned and proceed. Instead of, let me know your thoughts, try, please share your top concern about this approach by tomorrow morning. Include deadlines when they're relevant. When you get a chance means never in practice. It signals that this isn't important, which means it goes to the bottom of the priority list indefinitely. By Friday means Friday. Be specific. And for the love of productivity, reply in threads, not the main channel. Every message in the main channel is a notification to everyone in that channel. Your back and forth with one person doesn't need to interrupt the entire team. Thread your responses. Keep the main channel for new topics and announcements. There are situations where text-based communication, whether email or chat, is the wrong choice. Knowing when to switch to voice or video is a crucial communication skill. When emotions are running high, stop typing. Text strips out tone, facial expressions, and the immediate feedback that helps us calibrate our message. When you're frustrated, your text will come across as angrier than you intend. When you're trying to apologize, text feels cold. When conflict is present, pick up the phone or have a video call. The human connection of voice helps de-escalate. When the back and forth exceeds 3 messages on the same topic, you're probably being inefficient. A 5-minute call will resolve what would take an hour of messaging. Don't let pride or preference for asynchronous communication waste everyone's time. When nuance matters more than having a record, call. Some conversations need the ability to read reactions, clarify in real time, and explore ideas collaboratively. Text creates a record but loses nuance. Sometimes nuance is more important. Text creates distance. Voice creates connection. There's research showing that people who communicate by voice rather than text feel more connected and are perceived as more competent. For important relationships and important messages, default to higher fidelity communication. The default settings on most messaging apps are designed to maximize engagement, not your productivity. Every ping, every notification, every badge pulls your attention away from what you're doing. This is death by 1,000 cuts. Research consistently shows that constant interruptions destroy productivity. It's not just the time you spend checking the message, it's the cognitive cost of switching contexts. After each interruption, it takes significant time to get back into flow on what you were doing. Multiply this by dozens of notifications per day, and you've lost hours without doing any actual work. The solution is to batch your channel checking, turn off most notifications, check Slack or Teams at set intervals, maybe every hour or two. In between, do actual work. The world rarely ends in the hour you weren't monitoring your inbox. Use status features to set expectations. In deep work until 2 p.m. or in meetings all morning signals that you're not ignoring people, you're just focused. Most colleagues will respect this if you set clear expectations. Here's the truth. If something is truly urgent, it will find you. Someone will call, someone will walk over, someone will escalate. But if you treat every Slack message as urgent, you'll never get anything important done. Protect your attention ruthlessly. It's your most valuable resource. Let's talk about writing for executives and busy senior stakeholders. These are people who have 10 times more incoming communication than they can possibly process. If you want them to actually absorb what you're saying, you need to write differently than you would for anyone else. Here's the reality about senior executives. They skim. They have to. The volume of information coming at them every day is completely unmanageable otherwise. If you don't adapt your communication to this reality, you'll be ignored. Research suggests you have about 7 seconds before someone decides whether to keep reading or move on. That's roughly the time it takes to read your first sentence or two. If those sentences don't grab their attention, if they don't immediately see why this matters to them or what you need from them, they're moving to the next email in their inbox. This means your first line is everything. Don't open with, "I hope this email finds you well." Don't open with lengthy background. Open with the thing they need to know or do. We need your decision on the vendor selection by Thursday to meet our launch timeline. Bold your ask or your key message. In a wall of text, bold stands out. It catches the skimming eye. Use this strategically for the one thing you most need them to absorb. Don't bold everything or you dilute the effect. And always choose bullets over paragraphs when communicating with executives. A paragraph is a commitment to read. It requires sustained attention. Bullets are easy to scan quickly. They let busy people extract the key points without reading every word. Respect their time by making your content scannable. Journalists use a structure called the inverted pyramid. The most important information goes at the very top. Supporting details come second. Background and context come last. Why this structure? Because readers might stop at any point. They might get interrupted. They might lose interest. They might get the gist and decide they don't need more detail. If you front-loaded the important stuff, they still get the key message, even if they don't finish reading. For business writing, the inverted pyramid means put your ask or conclusion first, then provide the key supporting points that justify or explain that conclusion. Then, if still needed, include the full background and context. If someone only reads your first paragraph, they should still understand what you need. That's the test of a well-structured document or email. This is the opposite of how most of us were trained to write in school. Academic writing builds evidence toward a conclusion at the end. Business writing starts with the conclusion. Making this switch will dramatically improve how your communication is received by busy stakeholders. Here's a discipline that will improve everything you write for senior audiences: the one-page rule. If your core message can't fit on one page, you probably haven't distilled it enough. I'm not saying complex topics don't have complexity. They do. But the essence of a complex topic, the key question, the main options, the recommendation, that should be expressible concisely. For executive summaries, aim for 3 to 5 bullet points maximum, not 10 bullets, not paragraphs of prose, 3 to 5 discrete points that capture the essential information. If an executive only reads those bullets, they should understand the situation. The detailed analysis, the supporting data, the comprehensive background, all of that can go in appendices for those who want to dig deeper. Some executives will, most won't. But everyone benefits from a clear, concise summary up front. This discipline of compression is a sign of respect. You're saying, I know your time is valuable, so I've done the hard work of distilling this down to what matters. Ironically, this makes people more likely to engage with your content. Respect their time and you earn their attention. Delivering bad news is one of the hardest communication challenges. Most people handle it poorly by burying, deflecting, or delaying. Here's how to do it right. Never bury bad news in the middle of a message. Some people sandwich bad news between good news, hoping it will soften the blow. This backfires because it feels manipulative when people realize what you've done and the bad news still hits hard. Lead with the difficult information. I need to share some concerning news about the project timeline. This respects the recipient's intelligence and gives them the context to process everything else you say. Don't make them wait anxiously through preamble wondering what's coming. Own the bad news. Don't deflect blame to circumstances or other people even if they're partly responsible. The project is delayed is better than the project is delayed because the vendor didn't deliver. Take responsibility where appropriate. You'll be more respected for it. Always include what you're doing about the situation. Bad news without a forward path is just complaining. Here's the problem and here's what we're doing to address it is infinitely more useful than just here's the problem. Even if the plan isn't perfect, showing that you're taking action builds confidence. People can handle bad news. What they can't handle is feeling deceived, blamed, or left without a path forward. Let's shift from output, writing and speaking, to input, listening. Most communication training focuses on how to express yourself better, but listening is equally important and far more neglected. You've probably been taught active listening techniques. Reflect back what the person said, paraphrase to show understanding, say things like, "So what I hear you saying is," here's the problem with this approach. It often feels fake because it often is fake. People are following a mechanical technique rather than actually listening with genuine curiosity, and the person being actively listened to can usually tell when someone is going through the motions. The formulaic phrases become a substitute for actual attention. Someone nods along, parrots back your words using the approved phrases, and you can tell they're not really present. They're waiting for their turn to talk. They're thinking about what they'll say next. The active listening is performative. Real listening isn't a technique, it's a state of presence. It's actually being curious about what the other person is saying rather than waiting for your turn to talk. It's asking genuine follow-up questions because you want to understand, not because a training told you to ask follow-up questions. The most powerful listening move isn't any particular phrase, it's the pause. After someone finishes speaking, don't immediately respond. Let there be a moment of silence. This does two things. It signals that you're actually processing what they said rather than just waiting to talk, and it often prompts them to continue and go deeper into what they really mean. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence in conversation. When there's a pause, they rush to fill it. They jump in with another question, an opinion, a tangent. This is a mistake that costs you valuable information. When you ask someone a question and they give you their initial response, resist the urge to immediately ask another question or move on. Just wait, stay present, maybe nod slightly, hold the silence. What happens next is often remarkable. People will keep talking, they'll go deeper. They'll share the thing they were hesitant to share initially. The silence gives them permission to continue. It signals that you're genuinely interested in hearing more. The first thing someone says is often the surface answer, the polished version, the safe response. The gold is in the second thing they say, after the pause, when they realize you're really listening and it's safe to go deeper. But you only get there if you're comfortable holding silence. This takes practice. The urge to fill silence is strong, but once you develop this skill, you'll be amazed at what people tell you that they wouldn't have otherwise. You become someone people feel truly heard by. The quality of your questions determines the quality of information you receive. Most people ask questions inefficiently, getting surface-level answers when deeper insight was available. Open questions are almost always better than closed questions. Closed questions get yes or no answers. Did the project go well? Gets a yes or no. Open questions invite elaboration. What went well with the project generates actual insight. Questions starting with what and how tend to be the most productive. What were the main challenges? How did the team handle the deadline pressure? What would you do differently? These questions invite thoughtful, substantive responses. Be careful with why questions. Why can trigger defensiveness because it sounds like an accusation. Why did you make that decision sounds like justify yourself. Consider rephrasing what led you to that approach. Gets the same information without the implicit judgment. Perhaps most importantly, follow the thread of their interest, not just your agenda. When someone's energy picks up around a topic, that's a signal. Explore there. Some of the most valuable information comes when you follow where they want to go rather than rigidly sticking to your predetermined questions. When someone comes to you upset, frustrated, or stressed, the natural instinct is to jump into problem-solving mode. Resist that instinct. It usually makes things worse. People need to feel heard before they can hear solutions. If someone is venting about a problem and you immediately start offering fixes, they experience you as not listening. Their emotional experience hasn't been acknowledged. They'll often repeat themselves or escalate their frustration because they don't feel understood. Instead, validate the emotion first. That sounds really frustrating. I can see why that would be upsetting. That's a lot to deal with. These simple acknowledgments let the person know you've actually heard them. You don't have to agree with their interpretation of events. You're just recognizing their emotional experience. After you've validated, ask if they want help solving the problem or if they just needed to vent. Sometimes people just need to get it off their chest. The solution might be obvious to them once they've processed the emotion. By jumping straight to solutions, you rob them of that processing time. This is particularly important in leadership roles. When a team member comes to you with a problem, your instinct to immediately fix it can make them feel unheard and undervalued. Take a breath, acknowledge, ask what they need, then respond accordingly. Let's talk about documentation. The dirty secret is that most documentation is never read. It's created, filed away, and never touched again. This is a massive waste of effort. Let's fix it. The biggest problem with documentation isn't the content, it's findability. A perfectly written, comprehensive document that no one can locate is completely useless. Most organizations have critical knowledge buried in documents that nobody knows exist. I've seen this pattern repeatedly. Someone spends hours creating detailed documentation, files it in a folder structure that makes sense to them, and then is frustrated when people ask questions the documentation clearly answers. The documentation exists but isn't findable. Findability matters more than completeness. A short document that's easy to locate and answers the common questions is more valuable than a comprehensive reference that nobody can find. Less is more. Every unnecessary paragraph you include makes the useful information harder to find. Every tangent, every caveat, every just in case someone needs this section adds noise that obscures signal. Be ruthless about cutting. If it's not actively useful, it's actively harmful because it buries what is useful. And here's the rule that most people break. Update or delete, never abandon. Out-of-date documentation is worse than no documentation because it actively misleads people. If you can't commit to keeping a document current, delete it entirely. An acknowledged absence is better than an invisible lie. Here's a simple test to apply to any documentation. Answer these 4 questions, and you'll know whether your documentation is actually useful. First, can a new person onboard using this document alone? If someone unfamiliar with the subject can't use this document to get started without additional hand-holding, it's not serving its purpose. The ultimate test is giving it to fresh eyes and seeing if they succeed. Second, is the first paragraph immediately useful? If the first paragraph is organizational history, mission statements, or other context that seemed important to the writer, move it. Maybe put it at the end as background. Start with the useful stuff, the thing the reader came to learn. Third, are steps numbered and clear? If there's a process to follow, it should be numbered steps, not paragraphs of prose, not bullets with sub-bullets nested 3 levels deep, numbered steps that someone can follow one at a time. Fourth, when was it last verified and updated? If it's been more than 6 months since someone confirmed this documentation is still accurate, it's probably drifted from reality. Either update it or flag it prominently as potentially obsolete. Apply this test to your team's documentation. Be honest. You'll probably find that most of it fails on at least one of these criteria. That's normal. Now you know what to fix. Even if you create perfect documentation, it's useless if people can't find it when they need it. Let me share some principles for making documentation discoverable. Use the terms people will actually search for, not the technically correct internal terminology. If customers call it a refund, but internally you call it a credit adjustment, your documentation should use both terms. Think about what someone would type into a search box when they have the problem this documentation solves. Front-load keywords in titles and headings. Search results typically show the first words of a title. How to reset your password is more findable than a comprehensive guide to authentication. Password reset section. Put the essential keywords at the beginning. Link related documents to each other. When someone finds one piece of documentation, they often need related information. If your How to Submit Expenses document doesn't link to the Expense Categories document, people won't find it. Create a web of interconnected knowledge, not isolated documents. The mental shift is crucial. Great documentation is found, not filed. Most people think about where to put documentation. Better question, how will people find this? Start with the discovery experience and work backward to organization. Invest in your search functionality. Tag documents with relevant keywords. Create landing pages that organize related documentation. Make the path from question to answer as short as possible. Let's talk about presentations, specifically how to present effectively to people who would rather be anywhere else. In business context, that's most of your audience most of the time. Most presentations follow a predictable formula. Thank the audience for coming, show an agenda slide listing what you'll cover, provide extensive background, build methodically toward your conclusion. This formula exists because it's safe, not because it's effective. By the time you finally get to your point, you've lost half the room. People are checking their phones. They're thinking about their next meeting. They've mentally moved on. Skip the pleasantries. Don't spend your first 30 seconds thanking people for being in a meeting they were probably required to attend. It's filler that doesn't add value. Skip the agenda slide. They know why they're here, or at least they should. If they don't, you have a bigger problem that an agenda slide won't solve. Get to your point in the first 30 seconds. What's your recommendation? What do you need from them? What's the key insight they should take away? Start with that. Think about it from the audience's perspective. They're busy. They have 10 other things competing for their attention. They want to know, why should I care about this, and what do I need to do about it? Answer those questions immediately. Then you can provide whatever supporting detail is necessary for those who want it. Here's a presentation format that works remarkably well, especially for decision-oriented meetings, the two-slide meeting. Slide 1 contains your recommendation and the key data that supports it. This is everything most people in the room need to make a decision. The headline is your conclusion. The content is the essential evidence. Slide 2 is your supporting evidence for when you're challenged. It's the detail for the skeptics, the backup for the people who want to dig deeper, the answers to the likely objections. Everything else goes in an appendix that you may never show. That 40-slide analysis you built, it's reference material. Keep it available in case someone asks a detailed question, but don't present all of it. And here's the key. Leave most of the meeting time for discussion. People don't want to sit passively through slides. They want to engage, ask questions, raise concerns, and debate. A 10-minute presentation followed by 20 minutes of discussion is worth far more than a 30-minute presentation with no time for questions. Respect their time, make your point clearly, let them react. That's effective presenting. How you handle questions often matters more than your prepared content. Here's how to do it well. First, drop the filler phrases. That's a great question has become meaningless. Everyone says it, even when the question is terrible. It signals that you're stalling while you think of an answer. Just answer the question directly. If you don't know the answer, say so honestly. I don't have that data in front of me, but I'll follow up by end of day with the specifics. This is infinitely better than making something up or fumbling. Honesty about your limitations builds credibility. When you receive a hostile or loaded question, don't take the bait. Instead, repeat the question back in neutral terms. If I understand correctly, you're asking about our timeline assumptions. Let me address that. This gives you a moment to collect yourself and reframes the question on your terms. Learn to bridge back to your key message. Answer the question, but then connect back to your main point. The cost concern is valid, and here's how we've addressed it. This actually reinforces why the approach I'm recommending makes sense. Every answer is an opportunity to reinforce your core message. The best presenters constantly read the room and adjust. Here's how to do this effectively. Watch for the signs that you're losing people. Glazed eyes, phones appearing, side conversations starting, people leaning back or looking at the clock. These are signals that your content isn't landing. Don't plow ahead with your prepared material while the audience mentally checks out. When you notice you're losing them, make a conscious choice. You can acknowledge it. I'm sensing this might not be the most exciting material, so let me skip to what I think you actually care about. You can engage directly. Before I continue, what questions are on your mind? You can adjust your approach, speed up, add energy, tell a story, or cut to your conclusion. Remember that energy is contagious. If you're bored with your own material, they will be too. If you're engaged and believe what you're saying matters, that energy transfers. Your enthusiasm or lack thereof is one of the strongest signals in the room. Sometimes the best thing you can do is cut your losses. If you scheduled 30 minutes but realize after 10 that you've made your key points and people are ready to leave, end early. A 10-minute presentation where people leave engaged is more effective than a 30-minute presentation where they mentally checked out at 15. Let's talk about nerves because almost everyone gets nervous presenting, even experienced speakers. Here's a reframe that helps. Nervous energy and excited energy feel almost identical physiologically. Your heart races, your palms sweat, your adrenaline spikes. The only difference is the label you put on it. Instead of telling yourself, I'm nervous, try, I'm excited. Your body won't know the difference and your mind will follow. Preparation is the best anxiety reducer. Know your opening cold. The first 2 minutes are when you're most nervous. If you've practiced your opening until it's automatic, you can deliver it even while your brain is still catching up. Once you get those first words out, the rest flows more naturally. Arrive early and physically own the space. Walk around, test the equipment, stand at the front before anyone arrives. Make the space familiar. When people arrive, you're the host, not the guest. This psychological shift matters. And remember, the audience wants you to succeed. They're not hoping you'll fail. They'd rather be listening to something interesting than watching someone struggle. They're on your side. They want you to be good. If you stumble, they're sympathetic, not judgmental. Nerves don't go away entirely with experience, but they become familiar. You learn to use the energy rather than fight it. Let's preview how to approach difficult conversations. We'll go much deeper on this topic in a later episode, but I want to give you some foundational techniques now. The conversations we avoid, giving critical feedback, addressing conflict, asking for what we need, setting boundaries, these are often the most important conversations we can have, and most people blow them by going in unprepared. Write down your opening line, literally put it on paper. The first sentence you'll say when the conversation begins. This is the hardest part. The moment of highest anxiety. If you nail the opening, the rest flows more naturally. If you stumble at the start, you're recovering for the rest of the conversation. Know what outcome you want, not vaguely but specifically. What does success look like? What change are you seeking? What agreement do you need? If you don't know precisely what you're trying to achieve, you can't plan how to get there. Anticipate their likely responses. What objections will they raise? What emotions might surface? How will you respond to each? Thinking this through beforehand means you won't be caught off guard. You'll have considered responses ready. But here's the nuance. Prepare, don't script. Know your key points. Know your opening. Know how you'll handle likely objections. But don't try to script the entire conversation word for word. Real dialogue doesn't follow scripts, and you'll sound robotic and disconnected if you try to force it into one. When difficult conversations get heated, these phrases can bring the temperature down. They're not manipulation tactics. They're tools for genuine de-escalation. Help me understand is almost magic. It's completely non-threatening. It signals curiosity rather than accusation. It invites the other person to explain rather than defend. When you genuinely want to understand their perspective, this phrase creates space for them to share it. I might be wrong, but softens what comes next. You're acknowledging your own fallibility. This makes the other person less defensive because you're not claiming certainty or superiority. It opens dialogue rather than triggering defensiveness. What would need to change for shifts the conversation from arguing about the present to problem solving for the future. What would need to change for you to feel comfortable with this approach is collaborative rather than adversarial. It invites them to articulate their needs. Can we take a step back? Is useful when the conversation is spiraling. It creates a pause. It lets everyone catch their breath. Sometimes you just need to slow down and reset the emotional temperature before you can make progress. These phrases work because they're genuinely collaborative. Use them when you actually want to find resolution, not to win. What happens after the difficult conversation matters almost as much as the conversation itself. Here's how to follow up effectively. Document agreements immediately. Right after the conversation, while everything is fresh, write down what was decided. What did each person commit to? What's the timeline? What are the next steps? Memory is unreliable, especially after emotional conversations. Get it in writing. Send a brief summary to the other person. Thanks for the conversation. Here's my understanding of what we agreed. This serves two purposes. It confirms you're on the same page, and it creates a record in case of future disagreement about what was said. Check in a few days later. Just wanted to see how you're feeling about our conversation. This shows that you care about the relationship, not just getting your way. It gives them a chance to surface anything that's still bothering them. And it demonstrates that you're committed to the ongoing relationship, not just the immediate resolution. Relationships need repair time after conflict. Even when you resolve the issue, there can be residual tension. Don't pretend everything is immediately fine. Give space for things to normalize. Be a little extra thoughtful for a while. The relationship will often end up stronger than before if you handle the aftermath well. Let's wrap up with the key principles from our time together. First, lead with the ask. In emails, in presentations, in conversations, put the important thing first. Don't make people search through background and context to find what you need from them. Front load the critical information. Second, silence is a powerful tool. After you ask a question, wait. After someone finishes speaking, pause before responding. The best insights and the deepest conversations happen in the space you create by not rushing to fill every silence. Practice being comfortable with pauses. Third, findability beats completeness. Whether it's documentation or your key message in a presentation, being easy to find and understand matters more than being comprehensive. Comprehensive and unfindable is useless. Concise and accessible creates value. Fourth, for any important or difficult conversation, prepare your opening line. Write it down. Practice saying it. Nail the start, and the rest becomes easier. The beginning sets the tone for everything that follows. Communication is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with deliberate practice. Don't try to implement everything from today at once. Take one principle, focus on it for a week until it becomes natural, then add another. The difference between good communicators and average ones isn't talent. It's that good communicators have practiced these skills consciously until they became habits. You can do the same. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.